All right, Krystal, what's on your radar?
Well, there's some huge news for the Sanders campaign. A new national Emerson poll has Bernie surging into a tie for first place with Joe Biden. I guess maybe his campaign wasn't imploding, as has been suggested by pundits time and time again. So here's the poll. It's got Bernie and Biden both at 27%. Warren's at 20%, and new alleged frontrunner Pete down at 7%. All right, let's throw in all the caveats. This poll is a bit of an outlier, and it does have a sizable margin of error. Bernie's national average over at RCP is about 8 points lower than he shows up in this poll. However, something else significant did just happen as well. For the first time in 2 months, Bernie has overtaken Warren in that second place position in the Real Clear Politics national average. So we're not just talking about one outlier poll here. We're also talking about a trend that has Bernie on the rise and Warren falling off as Pete steals her voters. It's actually a pretty big deal, especially for a campaign that is consistently ignored and dismissed by the media. I mean, just look at this week's debate coverage. Neither CNN or Washington Post mentioned Sanders as either a winner or a loser of the debate. They just ignored him altogether. Over at the New York Times, Gail Collins made this insightful observation: "Don't think you can be president when you sound this cranky." That was it. That was the entirety of her critique. For Warren, on the other hand, she wrote, "She always has the best answers, and she's sounding more accessible, and no one else matched her." Just can't understand why so much of the public thinks that the media is biased. So earlier this week, I laid out the path for how Biden could win. It basically looks like not getting completely embarrassed in Iowa and New Hampshire, reclaiming some momentum in South Carolina, and then having a very strong Super Tuesday when a lot of southern states with significant black populations vote. I think there's actually a fairly good chance that's exactly what happens. Previously, I laid out the path for Elizabeth Warren. It looks like becoming the chosen candidate that white liberals coalesce around so that she wins Iowa and New Hampshire, and then shakes up the current dynamics that have voters of color favoring Biden and Bernie. Honestly, though, the rise of Pete and a few key Warren missteps have made that path seem less likely than it did at the time, but I certainly don't rule it out. So with Bernie on the rise, racking up endorsements from pop stars and political stars, breaking fundraising records, and firing up massive crowds, now seems like a good time to lay out exactly how Bernard Sanders could end up as the Democratic nominee. As we sit here today, I actually think Bernie winning or Biden winning are the two most likely scenarios. After all, they've got exactly the kind of solid and committed working class bases that traditionally launch Democratic candidates straight to the nomination. All right, so here's how I see it. I think to get the media to pay attention and convince the public that he's really got a shot, Bernie's got to win either Iowa or New Hampshire. But this is where their complete dismissal of him actually becomes an asset. If he's able to pull off a win after they've gone out of their way to ignore him, it's going to be a massive shock and major news, a potentially ground-shifting event. Now, I could be wrong about this, but I think if he doesn't pull off a win in one of these two first states, it's going to be tough to gain the momentum that he needs to upend Biden from that top spot. There's good reason to believe, though, that either one or both of those states is actually in reach. So one of the things that's critical in Iowa, of course, is organization and energy. Your supporters have got to show up to caucus. They got to understand the rules. They have to know how to win over other voters who are released when their candidates don't hit 15%. And this isn't Bernie's first trip to the rodeo. Moreover, every poll shows that his supporters are both the most enthusiastic and also the most committed. This latest Emerson poll that has him at the top actually proves this out once again. It's really pretty interesting. 71% of Bernie supporters say they will definitely vote for him. That compares to 60% of Biden supporters, 46% of Warren supporters, and only 31% of Buttigieg supporters. This is, of course, consistent with the idea that the white, affluent, liberal demographic is the most unsettled, shifting from Kamala to Warren and now to Pete, but they are definitely still in shopping mode. Now, New Hampshire has different strengths for Bernie. Of course, he's senator of a neighboring state, but maybe even more importantly, he's always done well with independents. It's an open primary, and you can easily see him pulling in new voters that aren't necessarily being reached by the pollsters. So if he comes out of Iowa or New Hampshire with a win, then it's off to the races. I think Biden will hold South Carolina almost no matter what, but Nevada is very much in play for Sanders, having a sizable Latino population, very strong union vote, and independent tradition. California and Texas are similarly target-rich environments for Team Sanders, with large young Latino populations and massive delegate counts up for grabs. Just so you get a little sense here, this is the reception that Bernie Sanders received last week at a Hispanic focus forum in LA that was open to all candidates. You would have thought it was a Bernie rally.
Senator, thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure.
So we saw you
So both Texas and California vote on Super Tuesday. Biden's got a lot of strongholds in southern states on Super Tuesday as well. But I wouldn't underestimate Bernie in the South. Biden might be strong with older African Americans, but Bernie consistently wins the younger demographics. If he takes California and Texas, holds down losses in the southern Super Tuesday states, then I think he's very likely to be the nominee. Something that Sanders senior advisor Chuck Rocha always stresses to us is the organization build-out. Look past Iowa and New Hampshire to who has the money and the field team to compete in these huge states like California. So right now, Sanders has about 40 paid staffers on the ground in the Golden State. Warren has 9, Pete has 5. I couldn't find any details for Biden, but given his cash woes, I can't imagine that he's terribly well positioned. One thing I'm often asked and think a lot about actually is whether the establishment would actually let Bernie win. The answer, frankly, is no. If they could actually wrap their head around the fact that he could very possibly end up the nominee, they would do absolutely everything they could to block him. But they're so discredited and impotent that I'm honestly not sure what they could do to stop him at this point. The more that they openly loathe him, the more ruling class candidates they threw at him, the stronger he'd become. Everything they could do to try to smear and slow him would only elevate him and make him more appealing to the young voters, working class voters, and independents who are disgusted with the party establishment. If they do wake up and panic, it could honestly be the best thing that could happen to him. In fact, the establishment's obvious vitriol, rather than just ignoring him, could be exactly the missing ingredient to put Bernie and his working class movement over the top. I am quite certain that he welcomes their hatred. Sagar, I thought it was pretty significant, him jumping over Warren in the RCP average. It's been a while.
It is a very significant development, and it is something that, of course, you're not going to hear
anywhere else. I didn't see it anywhere
And that's the
else.
thing. People will be like, oh, the Emerson poll is an outlier. Sure, maybe it is an outlier, but
Yeah.
the RCP polling average doesn't lie, right? That is something that we all will universally say, like, okay, that's kind of like where the race is trending right now. And I think that's right. I will say, despite all of this, Bernie has got to build more people into his coalition. He's got his people, and he continually plays to them. And unlike Trump, he doesn't have enough of his people relative to everybody else in the field to outright win the nomination. So, I mean, I'll go back to my debate criticism. He needs to step up his game and start trying to pull in some of the people who are voting for Elizabeth Warren and start trying to pull in people who are voting for Joe Biden.
Yeah.
The people voting for Biden are the exact same demographic as the people who are voting for Bernie. He needs to go after them and make the case, A, that he's electable, and B, that they can be comfortable that he will deliver what was for them. I think Matt Stoller always makes a great point here, which is that part of the reason that so many Democratic voters are scared is because Obama basically promised them the moon and then delivered neoliberal corporatism.
Right.
And so they're like, whoa, we're scared of Bernie and Warren, but particularly of Bernie because he's promising like a true revolution. And we gave that guy a chance. You know, the guy with the funny name, he was promising us these amazing things and we believed in him and he didn't deliver. And so Bernie has to make the case that he can actually deliver.
I think that there is such ingrained, like, conventional wisdom over decades of Democrats having beat into their heads that you have to triangulate, you have to be a centrist to win. And almost no data, like, it doesn't matter how much data you hold up that that's not the case. That Bill Clinton didn't actually run as a centrist, he ran as a populist. That Barack Obama did not run as, like, I'm going to sell out to Goldman Sachs. He ran as, like, this sort of more populist, revolutionary movement building type of candidate. And Hillary Clinton, who did run as the centrist, lost. Not to mention, over the years when Obama was in office, if you looked down ticket, I mean, we got decimated across the country. Democrats got destroyed in state house after state house, lost the House, lost the Senate, et cetera, et cetera. So this sort of just let's fall back on centrism thing doesn't work, but it's been so ingrained with the Democratic base that it's hard to overcome. And I do think that is the hurdle for Bernie Sanders, convincing people that he could really beat Donald Trump.
Right.
Poll after poll shows that he can, right? Shows that him doing...
It's possible.
Him doing
it's
well...
not possible for Warren, I don't think.
I don't think so either. And I doubt, this is what's funny to me, is that a lot of people are going to Pete as the electability candidate. I'm like, this guy doesn't, of everybody, he doesn't stand a shot at all.
Please nominate Pete.
I mean, there's like no chance that he would win. And so it just goes again to show you how strong that instinct of like, well, he's a centrist, so he could win. He's a centrist, so he could win. When, you know, if you just look at the polling and the data and the response to him, there's no way that guy would win.
No, that's not what people want. But Bernie does have to expand his coalition. He needs to make his case better than making doing rally talking points at a debate. He's got to start hitting Biden.
He's overtaken Warren.
Yeah.
Now he's got to come for Biden. Otherwise, the status quo is Biden wins.
And the current trajectory is not going to put him over the top in the timeline that he needs.
Yeah, and even if he is, even if his coalition is undersampled, even if he does bring new people in, it's still not enough. He's got to do a little bit better than that.
Yeah, exactly.
Next up on Rising, the top 2 stories this week in D.C., impeachment and Democratic debate number 5.
Next, the Hill's editor-in-chief Bob Cusack. He joins us next to debrief us on those stories when Rising continues.